This is for the Speed of Sound lab. You can find it inside of Schoology and share it with Notability if you haven't done that already. There should be thermometers out in the room, and you can go ahead and collect the temperature of the room. You're going to need that for later in the lab because, as you know, temperature affects how quickly sound is moving in the room, and so we're going to need to know what the temperature is in the classroom. You're going to need to go ahead and draw 2 wavelengths of standing wave, just like I've done here, and mark the quiet and the loud spots. So loud sounds, you can put this in your lab here, happen at antinodes. And quiet sounds, oops, happen at nodes. And so you're going to mark those here. Later in the lab, it also asks you to then label these as L1, L2, L3, L4, and same with the quiet sounds so that you can have each spot marked and it's easier to talk about what's happening at each of those places. As you scroll down in the lab, you'll see that it's asking you to go ahead and label all these parts, L1, L2, L3, and you can label the cues as well. And then I want you to go ahead and put in what portion of a wavelength each one of those spots is. So I'm going to mark one full wavelength in red, and you can do the same on your lab. So here's one full wavelength, right? We've got a crest and a trough. It goes from node to antinode to node to antinode to node. But what this is asking is how far from the bottom of the box is each mark. So if I was just going to the first loud spot, L1, how much of a wave is that? So how much of a wave is just this piece right here? If we were to kind of mark off where the first loud spot is there, how much of a wave is that? So take a look at it, see if you can answer that question for yourself, and tell me how much of a wave is that if you're just going to right about here. And you should come up with 1/4 of a wavelength. Now I want you to go ahead and do that same thing for each of these spots. How much of a wave do you have at L2? And so on. And fill those in. You can discuss it with your lab partners and make sure that you're all getting the same answer there. So you want to make sure that you're drawing in on this part of the lab when you scroll down from the first quiet spot Q1 to the first loud spot L1, and you want to make sure that it is fitting within the tube from where it hits the water to the top of the tube. So I've kind of traced that out in red. But you need to scroll back up to where you drew your wavelengths in and look and see what the shape of that wave would look like if you are only going between Q1 and L1 and trace that into the tube right here. The conclusion questions you should be able to follow along after you've completed the lab, and then I'll answer any questions you have during class.